sort of share with you some thoughts about how innovation, creation, discovery happens. That's what my book is about. A lot of what we are told about creation and invention and discovery comes from around the 1800s. In 1850, a publication called the German Music Journal published a letter from Mozart in which Mozart explained his creative process. And he basically said, when I'm in a good mood and nobody interrupts me, a fantastic symphony comes into my head, complete, in a sort of sudden flash, and basically then I just have to write it again. That's how I compose. The basic idea is, if we get ourselves in the right mood, inspiration will strike, we will have amazing ideas. And the trick of creating is to cultivate more of these moments. Funny thing is, the letter was fake. Mozart sat there, generated a harpsichord. He couldn't work without one. He had to sometimes, as his family moved around, had to have this harpsichord carried up many flights of stairs and so on. He understood the theory of music very well, and he worked on the harpsichord and made changes and more changes and more changes, and eventually he got a piece of music. And that's important because we've all inherited these ideas about creativity that are based on, it turns out, completely false premises. And there's this notion that creating has to be magical, creating has to be romantic, and creating has to be special. This is a mathematician philosopher called Alfred Whitehead, and in 1927 he made up a word. And the word that Alfred Whitehead coined was creativity. So it may be a surprise to know that creativity is a word that is less than 100 years old. And it's really attached to this idea that making things new or making new things is magical and requires a special kind of brain. And one of the things you see in the literature of creativity is a series of kind of problems, brain teasers, of which the most famous one is something which is now known as the candle problem. And the point is that the way the candle problem actually gets solved is the way every new thing ever gets created, which is in a series of small incremental steps. This is actually the secret of creation. Okay? It's tiny incremental steps. And does your solution work? Well, either it does or it doesn't. And if it does, there's probably something wrong with it, so that's your next problem. Creating is just thinking. And funnily enough, the best solution is the one that solves the most problems, and the best solution is when you go around this loop as often as you possibly can. And you just keep going, because everything can improve. Everything that's ever been made has been made in this way. Somebody's thinking about something, and they make something that is either incrementally better than something else that already exists, or something that is incrementally better than the thing that they've already made. Portable telephones, or cell phones, or mobile phones have been getting smaller, more complicated, and I guess somewhere around here or here. You can also do email, or not just making phone calls anymore. And so you have this challenge, right, which is how do you navigate these things? You have this other technology that's been emerging over 30 years, which is the touch screen and the multi-touch screen. And so somebody has this amazing idea to put them into a phone, and they create this. Oh, probably not what you were expecting, right? Well, the first phone with multi-touch screen was called the LG Prada, made in Korea. came out in 2006. Also came out with a phone with multi-touch on the screen. And the reason I want to talk about this briefly is it's very familiar, and this is hailed as this amazing radical breakthrough, like one of those Mozart symphonies, right? Oh wow, Steve Jobs went to sleep one day, and Steve Jobs is a genius. Everybody, what's his secret? What's the magic of Apple and Steve? And well, problem solution loops again and again and again, and identifying the right problems to work on. That's the quote-unquote secret. This is one of the first parachutes invented by someone called Gaston. And here we see it being tested from the first platform of the Eiffel Tower. Beautiful picture. The thing to know about this picture is this is not Gaston. This is a dummy. Because Gaston liked to take steps. And having invented his parachute, and he thought it was going to work, but he needed to get up high, and therefore he took a mannequin up and dropped it, and had a very successful test, and then he learned some things, and he continued. He had a rival. He was disgusted that this got any attention at all, because this is really fake. What the hell? If the guy had any confidence in his parachute, he wouldn't need a dummy. 1 year later, Franz Reichelt took his design to the same platform on the Eiffel Tower, but he wasn't going to use a dummy. He jumped off and broke his neck and died. So how do you take this? How do you take this and do it in an organization? Because everything I just talked about has been really, I guess Apple as an organization, but most of the examples are individuals in the case of the Wright brothers. One of the best ways I know to talk about how to make this work in an organization is something called the Marshmallow Challenge. If we had more time, we would do it. But the Marshmallow Challenge, which was developed by a couple of guys from IDEO, my agency, about 10 years ago now. You break people into teams, and you give them 20 sticks of uncooked, very important, uncooked, a yard of sticky tape, a yard of string, and a marshmallow. And the challenge is you have 18 minutes, and in your team you have to build the tallest possible tower that will, unsupported, hold the marshmallow. That is the Marshmallow Challenge. It is a really interesting exercise in how to create and invent and discover in a team. And one of the very interesting things about it is observing what happens when you give this exercise. Here's an example, just so you can kind of imagine what a finished tower might look like. And the results are always very consistent. MBAs will typically make a tower about 10 inches high. CEOs, much more experienced, they'll make a tower about 21 inches high on average. The people who consistently win the Marshmallow Challenge, kindergartners on average make a tower that's 27 inches in 18 minutes. So the interesting question, if you're thinking about how do you create in organizations, is what is it that kindergartners do and know how to do that these people don't know? I mean, the really interesting thing is, and the challenge isn't old enough for this yet, but I'd like to do it. I'd actually like to take some of the kindergartners who built 27-inch towers and wait until their MBAs and see if they can. Because something has happened, right? There's a 17-inch deficit. They've been taught and educated in how to make worse getting back. So here are some very proud kindergartners with one of their towers. How do we do it? What And you talk about this a lot. But basically, the secret of the marshmallow challenge is marshmallows are heavier than you think they are. And what kindergartners do, there are interesting psychological reasons for this, is they sit down and almost immediately start trying to figure out how to build towers out of spaghetti. And at some point, normally after 3 or 4 minutes, they're ready to try and put a marshmallow on a tower. And that's when they figure out, oh, this thing's heavier than we thought it was. So they go through a loop, and they solve the problem. MBAs almost invariably only put the marshmallow on the tower in the 18th. What do you think the MBAs are doing for the other 17? Yeah, they're talking. And what are they talking about? Who's in charge? Okay? Kindergarten's going to do that. Spaghetti, let's go. Well, hey, that's a good idea. How about this? Does this work? No. Oh, let's try something else. Problem, solution, problem, solution. The problem the MBAs are trying to solve is who's in charge, because they never know. There might be someone from McKinsey or an investment banking group like behind the glass that you don't know about. Right? This could be your big shot. Chance to step up and show your leadership. And actually, most of what happens for the MBAs between about minutes 4 and about minute 14, 15 is planning. All planning. Aggressive is jargon for stupid, and planning is jargon for talking. Talking is not the same as doing, okay? The average office worker claims to spend 6 hours a week in meetings. When you are in a meeting, you are an MBA student in the first 17 minutes of the marshmallow challenge. Okay? You are actually not accomplishing very much. There are some meetings that are valuable, meetings with customers, to find out what customers need. It's valuable. Occasional updates, potentially valuable, but when you've got more than 2 or 3 people in there, you're probably not solving any problems. So, for something like ReadyTalk, incredibly powerful tool for driving problem solution groups. I understand from the part of the meeting I attended that there's also the webinar piece, which is very valuable. But in terms of internal stuff, a great way to use a tool like ReadyTalk, in my opinion, and I don't speak for ReadyTalk, I'm clear, I don't want to say this, is these ad hoc problem solution exchanges that can now happen even if somebody's not in the same location as you. Because every time you do that, every time you put your marshmallow on your tower and find out it falls down, you win. So here's a story about a creative organisation who was one of the pioneers in doing just that. And it's 1943. The Nazis were in mass production with this previously unknown jet fighter that could go 600 miles an hour. This was going to win the war for Nazi Germany. Gave Lockheed 150 days to make a jet fighter that could defeat the Messerschmitt. And it took them 132 days to get that airplane into the air. How did they do it? Well, the most important thing happened years before. This is the guy that really clued me into how to understand the Lockheed situation. He's called Frank Filippetti. He's a music producer. He produces George Michael and Barbra Streisand, various rock bands. He's won all sorts of Grammys, very successful. And I had him talk one time about how he manages all these egos in the room when he manages big rock bands, and how he manages the creative process. And he said he's got one rule. He won't let anybody sit around talking about what it's going to sound like if you have a guitar solo, or if you have background vocals here, or if you do this instead of this. He's like, we're musicians, we're in a studio, just play with it. And it turns out that, no matter how big people's egos are, if you play the thing that somebody's arguing about, everybody generally agrees whether it sounds good or not. So this is the shortcut that it turns out applies to the Lockheed story, because this is the guy who led the development of that jet fighter. His name is Kelly Johnson. And he walked in on day one, 23 years old. And this is what he said. There's all these PhDs in aerodynamics and engineers who are trying to save their company with this new airplane. And you walk in as the guy hired to do the technical drawings, and you say, yeah, it's not going to work, that airplane. But this guy said, show me. So Johnson was given the opportunity to put his money where his mouth was and demonstrate that there was a problem and then figure out how to solve it. And he did. And not only did Lockheed survive and grow as a result of that airplane, which was instrumental in the Second World War, he became the guy they put in charge of making a jet in 150 days. Flew first time, was not needed in the war as it happened. And then, this is a guy called Ben Rich. So Kelly Johnson now is the guy that won the war and the guy that built the company and was very successful, very famous. And then there's this engineer called Ben Rich, who's a junior guy at Lockheed. And Ben has this idea for an airplane that everybody jokes is called the hopeless diamond. This is his sketch. And he doesn't report directly to Johnson, but Johnson finds out about it, and according to Ben Rich, walks in with the drawing, screws it up, throws it on the ground, and kicks him in the behind. And calls him a dumb something. Impolite term. So Rich thinks he's going to get fired. Because this radical new airplane idea has just gotten kicked in the ass by the guy who runs it. But what Johnson says is, show me that it works. And these two guys, it's a true story, place a 25-cent bet on whether the hopeless diamond will do the thing that Rich says it will do. Now, what is the thing Rich says it will do? This is the 1950s. You can't fly in combat anymore because there are these things called guided missiles. Every plane, pretty much, that in the Vietnam War got shot down by guided missiles. This technology is really good. It uses radar and computing, and it locks onto the plane. So Rich's idea is to build a plane that radar can't detect. So the bet is, you put that into the electromagnetic chamber, and I bet you it's going to have a big radar footprint. It's not going to work. So they made the model, they put it into the electromagnetic chamber, and it had the radar cross-section 10,000 times smaller than anything anybody had ever seen before. Ben Rich won the bet, and he became the guy in charge of the Sunworks, which is still the name for Lockheed's Advanced Research Division. And the plane became this. And also, by the way, interesting piece of current information, was turned into a helicopter. This is called stealth technology that would not have existed if it hadn't been for the show me culture inside of Lockheed, as a jet fighter would not have existed had it not been for the show me culture inside of Lockheed. All hinged on a 25-cent bet. Now, most organizations squash kids like that in a heartbeat, without thinking about it, and without ever saying, show me. Those are the magic words of creativity. You drive the problem solution loops, and the way you drive them is by putting the marshmallow on the spaghetti. Okay? See what you've got. That's another valuable thing in a creative organization, by the way, I reason about like meetings, is if someone has an idea in a meeting, if you say to your engineer, why do you do it like this? The engineer should be able to say, show me. Make one. Show me a prototype. Show me that it works. It's not okay to be the person who sees the problem but doesn't want to show anybody the solution. That's actually not helpful. You're not the devil's advocate, you're the devil. So I don't believe in recipes and formulas and the 27 secrets of highly creative geniuses or anything like that. But if you want to take any magic away at all, I think the more your organisation uses these two words to drive problem solution loops, the more you will create, the more you will invent, the more you will discover. The less you'll end up like this guy, the more you'll end up like that guy, and you're certainly not going to be him, but you'll do very well